Let me drop a truth on you. 40 years, men been spilling secrets in ways they don't even realize. Secrets about what they really feel when it comes to sex and love. But here's the twist. Most of what matters, most of what's heavy, they'll never admit out loud. See, the world trained men to wear a mask, to keep the soft parts locked up. Smile when it hurts. Stay silent when you're drowning. Pretend conquest equals connection. Pretend pride equals peace. But behind closed doors, when nobody's watching, the truth leaks out. In the loneliness after the body's gone, in the silence when the heart's screaming, in the emptiness that sex alone can't fill. This ain't about judging men, it's about exposing the blueprint they inherited. It's about looking at the patterns, the pride that builds walls, the silence that breaks families, the ego that confuses love for performance. If we gonna talk real, if we gonna break cycles, then somebody gotta shine light on the things men been carrying but never confessing. Because the truth is, love requires exposure, and without that, we just repeating the same broken story. Tonight, we're not repeating it, we're rewriting it. When we talk about how men been conditioned to be silent, we're talking about a system that's been working for decades, maybe longer. From the time a boy is young, the world starts shaping them, telling them what it means to be a man. Don't cry, don't show weakness, don't let nobody see you hurting, don't ever let your guard down. It's drilled in so deep that by the time he's grown, silence feels natural, almost like survival. But that silence ain't peace, it's a prison. Men carry pain, doubts, insecurities, but they push them down until they don't even recognize them anymore. It's not because they don't feel, it's because they've been taught that feeling out loud makes you less of a man. This conditioning starts at home, in the streets, in locker rooms, in the music, in the movies. Every time a boy tries to speak on what he's going through, somebody checks him, calls him soft, tells him to man up. That's the message. Strength means shutting your mouth. And when that becomes normal, it spills over into relationships. Men grow into adults that don't know how to say, I'm scared, or I don't know how to love right, or I need help. They replace words with silence, and when they can't stay silent, they replace silence with anger, aggression, or distance. It's a defense mechanism, but it ends up doing damage to the very people they care about. The silence shows up heavy in love and sex. When men can't talk about emotions, they start expressing themselves only through physical intimacy. They use sex as the language for closeness because words feel too risky. But that leaves a gap. The partner might be craving honesty, transparency, conversation about fears or hopes, but all she gets is the body, never the soul. That's not because the man doesn't care, but because he's been conditioned to keep the soul locked away. He's been told that opening it up might be used against him. Vulnerability to him equals weakness, and weakness equals danger. The weight of silence doesn't just affect the individual, man, it affects generations. If a father never says I love you, his son grows up believing men don't need to say it. If a husband never admits when he's hurting, his wife learns to read anger instead of honesty, and the cycle keeps spinning. It becomes generational silence, where the men in the family all carry unspoken lessons that love is supposed to be quiet, hidden, proven only through providing or protecting. Nobody teaches them that love also needs to be heard. That intimacy grows through shared fears and dreams, not just physical acts or financial stability. The truth is, silence costs men relationships, friendships, even their mental health. Holding everything in leads to stress, to self-destruction, to bad decisions. Some men cope through addiction, some through violence, some by running from love altogether. And the saddest part is, most don't even realize they're doing it. They think they just living the way men are supposed to live. They don't know that silence was taught to them, planted them like a seed, and watered by culture until it grew into something normal. There's another layer too. The world celebrates the silent man. Think about how society paints the strong figure, stoic, cold, unemotional. The man who never talks about his pain gets respect, gets seen as powerful. Meanwhile, the man who says, I'm struggling, gets labeled as weak. That pressure keeps men locked in cages they don't even see. They don't admit fears in sex, don't admit confusion in love, don't admit when they're drowning. They smile, they grind, they perform, but on the inside is a storm nobody else gets to see. To break that conditioning takes courage, and that courage don't always look glamorous. It's in the small acts, telling a partner, I feel insecure sometimes, or telling a son, it's okay to cry. It's admitting that silence has been a shield, but also a barrier. Men learning to speak their truths isn't just about self-expression, it's about rewriting what strength really means. Because silence was never strength, it was survival. And survival ain't the same as living. Pride and ego are two forces that shape how men approach love and sex, and they often blur the line between connection and conquest. From a young age, men are praised for achievement, for winning, for proving themselves. That mentality seeps into relationships, turning intimacy into another field of competition. Instead of asking, how do I connect? The question becomes, how do I dominate? How do I validate myself? How do I prove I am enough? Pride makes love about image. Ego makes sex about numbers, about performance, about being able to say you conquered. But none of that equals closeness. None of that equals fulfillment. Pride keeps men from admitting when they need love, when they crave affection, when they want reassurance. It whispers in their ear that needing someone makes them weak, that showing dependency will lower their status. So instead of saying, I want to be held, they act cold. Instead of admitting, I'm afraid to lose you, they act distant. The ego steps in to cover the cracks, and suddenly intimacy becomes a mask. Sex becomes a way to hide the longing, the way to show dominance instead of vulnerability. It's not about being present, it's about proving something to the partner, to themselves, to the world. This distortion creates a gap. On one side, there's the desire for closeness. On the other, there's the need to protect the ego. Men want to feel love, but they want to look untouchable. They want to be respected, but they fear looking soft. That contradiction makes relationships heavy. Partners end up confused because they feel the man's body, but can't reach his heart. The man, in turn, feels misunderstood because deep down he's yearning for more, but his pride won't let him confess it. That silence breeds frustration, and frustration often leads to arguments, cheating, or emotional distance. In sex, ego turns intimacy into performance. It becomes about lasting longer, looking stronger, satisfying in a way that boosts his confidence more than it nurtures the bond. It's not about connection, it's about validation. Every act becomes a scoreboard. But when ego drives, it blinds men to the emotional side of sex, the need to be present, to listen, to express tenderness. They chase the feeling of winning, but winning doesn't always equal fulfillment. You can leave the bed with your pride intact, but your soul still starving. In love, pride stops men from apologizing, from admitting fault, from saying I was wrong. Ego convinces them that to be respected, they have to be right all the time. That mindset kills communication. Instead of working through problems, they build walls. Instead of opening up, they double down. It's not because they don't care, it's because they've been taught that losing an argument equals losing themselves. So they protect their pride even if it costs them the relationship. Pride and ego also show up in how men choose partners. Some chase the woman who boosts their image, who looks good on their arm, who makes them feel validated in the eyes of others. They confuse attraction with achievement, thinking love is about status. But real intimacy ain't about status, it's about safety, trust, vulnerability. When ego drives the choice, men often end up in relationships that look good on the outside but feel empty on the inside. They chase what their pride wants instead of what their soul needs. The tragedy is that many men don't even realize this distortion is happening. They think they're just being men, just following what they've been taught. But underneath the bravado, they feel the weight. They feel the emptiness after sex that was just performance. They feel the distance in the love that never allows them to drop their guard. They feel the loneliness of being celebrated for strength, but never embraced for honesty. That's the quiet battle happening inside. A man caught between his pride and his desire for genuine connection. Breaking that cycle means unlearning years of programming. It means realizing that ego is fragile and pride is a mask. True intimacy requires humility. It requires admitting you don't have all the answers, that sometimes you're scared, sometimes you're insecure, sometimes you need reassurance. It requires letting go of the scoreboard, letting go of the image, and choosing presence over performance. But to get there, men have to confront the hardest truth. The ego that protected them in the world might be the very thing blocking them from love. But love requires exposure, and that's something a lot of men struggle to grasp because exposure feels dangerous. From the time they're young, they've been taught to armor up, to guard their feelings, to never let anybody see what's really going on inside. But the truth is, love can't survive behind armor. You can't really connect with someone if you're always hiding the parts of yourself that feel tender, uncertain, or afraid. Exposure is the risk that makes love real. It's saying, here I am, flaws and all, and I trust you enough to see me. Without that, love becomes shallow, a performance instead of a partnership. Men often believe they're protecting themselves and their relationships by keeping their insecurities to themselves. They don't want to admit when they're jealous, when they're scared of being abandoned, when they feel like they're not good enough. They cover those emotions with silence, with pride, with bravado. But the things they hide don't disappear. They leak out in other ways. Through anger, through distance, through a constant need for control. Exposure, on the other hand, lets the pressure out. When a man can look his partner in the eye and say, I feel insecure right now, he's not weakening himself, he's building a deeper foundation. That kind of honesty invites understanding instead of confusion, closeness instead of conflict. The challenge is the exposure feels like losing control, and control is something men are taught to value above all else. In the world, control is safety. On the streets, in business and competition, the man who loses control is the one who gets taken advantage of. That mentality seeps into relationships, but love is different from the world. Love isn't about domination, it's about surrender. You can't control love and truly experience it at the same time. To love fully, you have to risk being hurt, risk being misunderstood, risk being rejected. That's the essence of exposure. It's stepping into uncertainty and trusting that the bond is strong enough to hold you. And sex exposure means more than just being physically naked. It means being emotionally naked too. It's admitting your desires, your fears, your boundaries. It's saying what you want instead of pretending, and listening when your partner does the same. Without that vulnerability, sex becomes just physical release. With exposure, it becomes connection, an exchange of trust and truth. Too many men miss out on that depth because they're afraid of looking weak, afraid of admitting they don't always have it together. But intimacy without exposure is just a transaction. True intimacy requires honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. Though exposure also plays a role in conflict. Every relationship faces tension, arguments, misunderstandings. Pride tells men to shut down or fight back, to protect their ego at all costs. But exposure says, I care enough about this bond to show you my hurt instead of my anger. That shift changes everything. Instead of pushing each other away, couples can start pulling closer because the fight is no longer about winning, it's about understanding. Love grows in those moments of raw truth when both people are willing to lay down their defenses and be real. Generationally, men have been told that exposure is dangerous, but keeping walls up is just as risky. It leads to relationships that feel distant, partners who feel unseen, and men who carry loneliness even in the middle of love. The tragedy is that many don't even realize what's missing. They think they're doing right by being strong, stoic, silent. They don't recognize that what their partner craves is not perfection, but presence. Exposure is presence. It's showing up fully, not just as the provider, the protector, or the performer, but as the flawed, complicated, emotional human being they really are. The irony is that the very thing men fear, being seen in their weakness, is what actually makes them strong in love. A partner doesn't fall in love with the mask. They fall in love with the man behind it, the scars, the doubts, the imperfections. That's where connection lives. Exposure doesn't weaken love, it strengthens it. It builds trust. Because trust can't grow where truth is hidden. And once trust is strong, love becomes unshakable. That's the kind of bond men have been searching for, but too often miss because they're scared to lay their armor down. Irrational silence breeds broken cycles because what a man refuses to speak on doesn't disappear, it gets inherited. Pain, insecurity, fear, confusion. If it isn't voiced, it gets passed down like an unspoken law. Boys watch their fathers and uncles and older brothers move through life without ever admitting when they're hurt, when they're scared, when they're confused about love. They absorb the lesson without it ever being said out loud. Real men don't talk about feelings. Real men don't cry. Real men don't ask for help. And so the silence becomes tradition, disguised as strength. But really, it's just a chain. A father who never tells his son he loves him might think his actions providing, protecting, being present are enough. And in many ways, they are powerful acts of love. But that son grows up with a hole, not because love wasn't there, but because it wasn't spoken. He learns to measure love by actions alone, and he repeats the same pattern with his children. The silence becomes a legacy, and generations later, families are still struggling to express tenderness. Nobody meant harm, but harm happened anyway, because the silence stripped love of its language. This generational silence also shows up heavy in relationships. If a man grows up never hearing vulnerability, he won't know how to share it himself. When he gets into a partnership, he carries that silence with him. He doesn't say, I'm afraid of losing you, when he feels insecure. He doesn't say, I need comfort, when he's overwhelmed. Instead, he shuts down, lashes out, or runs away. His partner feels abandoned not because he doesn't love her, but because he doesn't know how to show his love in words. That silence, repeated again and again, creates fractures that could have been healed if only he knew how to speak what was inside him. Generational silence also teaches men that their pain doesn't matter. Many boys watch their fathers push through hardship without complaint, watch them break their backs for the family without ever admitting exhaustion or despair. They admire that toughness, but also internalize it. So when life crushes them, when heartbreak cuts them deep, when loss feels unbearable, they don't reach out, they bury it. Because that's what they were shown. But buried pain doesn't stay buried. It leaks out through anger, addiction, infidelity, detachment. The cycle repeats, and another generation grows up watching silence disguised as resilience. This damage is not just emotional, it's cultural. Communities suffer when men can't voice their truth. Cycles of violence, distrust, and broken homes are often fueled by unspoken wounds. A man who is never taught to express love or fear struggles to model it for his children. His son grows up hard, his daughter grows up questioning her worth, and the cycle stretches forward. The silence of one generation becomes the dysfunction of the next. And because nobody says it out loud, it feels normal. People believe this is just how men are, when really it's just how men have been trained to be. Breaking that silence is difficult because it means confronting tradition. It means a man has to say words his father never said, has to admit feelings his grandfather never admitted. That can feel like betrayal, like weakness, like stepping outside the code. But the truth is, breaking silence is not betrayal, it's liberation. It's rewriting the story so the next generation doesn't have to carry the same weight. It's teaching sons that love can be spoken, teaching daughters that men can be soft and still be strong. It's healing wounds before they become scars that spread through a family tree. The cycle can be broken in small ways. A man telling his child, I love you every day, even if it feels awkward at first. A man apologizing to his partner instead of shutting down. A man admitting to his friends that he's struggling instead of pretending he's fine. These small cracks in the silence create space for new patterns to grow. They show the next generation that vulnerability is not weakness, it's a form of courage. When silence is passed down, love stays incomplete. It never reaches its full depth because too much of it is locked away. But when the silence is broken, love becomes whole. Families become stronger. Relationships become more honest. Communities become healthier. It's not easy to unlearn what's been taught for decades. But every man who chooses to speak his truth plants a seed of change. That seed grows into a cycle that no longer breaks but builds. Sex without emotional honesty is empty because the act itself can only carry so much weight before it starts to feel hollow. Physical connection is powerful, no doubt, but it was never meant to be the full definition of intimacy. When two people come together without truth, without openness, without vulnerability, the body might be present, but the soul is missing. That absence is what makes the experience feel shallow. It's like eating fast food when you're starving. Your stomach gets filled for the moment, but the hunger always comes back stronger. Emotional honesty is the substance that gives sex depth, turning it from a transaction into a union. For a lot of men, sex becomes the language they use when they don't know how to speak from the heart. They might not say, I love you, but they'll reach for their partner in bed. They might not admit their insecurities, but they'll try to prove themselves through performance. It's not that they don't feel, it's that they've been conditioned to equate physical closeness with emotional closeness. But the problem is, if the words never come, if the honesty never shows up, sex can't bridge that gap forever. The partner might begin to feel used or unseen because the emotional hunger is left unfed. Without honesty, sex becomes a cover-up. A man who is afraid of being vulnerable might use it to distract from conversations he doesn't want to have. Arguments might end in physical intimacy, not because the issue was solved, but because it was avoided. That kind of dynamic breeds resentment over time. What started as passion becomes a band-aid, and eventually the wound underneath gets too deep to ignore. Emotional honesty, on the other hand, allows sex to heal instead of hide. When both people can admit their fears, their needs, their desires, sex becomes an extension of that truth, not a replacement for it. The emptiness also shows up in the aftermath. When sex is disconnected from honesty, the moment passes and leaves a void. One or both partners might feel lonely even though they just share something so intimate. That loneliness comes from the realization that bodies were close but hearts were distant. It creates confusion, especially for people who equate sex with love. They can't understand why they feel unsatisfied afterward, why something feels missing. The missing piece is the vulnerability that never made it into the room. Emotional honesty doesn't mean every encounter has to be heavy or filled with deep conversations, but it does mean creating space where truth is allowed. It's being able to say, I need you right now because I feel distant, or I want to feel closer to you, or this is what I really like and this is what I don't. It's about sharing the inner world that the body alone can't reveal. When that honesty exists, sex stops being just an action and becomes a reflection of the bond. The act deepens connection instead of trying to replace it. For men especially, this truth is hard to accept because society has taught them that sexual conquest equals worth. Numbers, performance, dominance, those things are celebrated. But nobody talks about the emptiness that follows when all you've collected are bodies, not bonds. Many men reach a point where they realize they've had plenty of experiences but very little connection. That realization can hit hard because it exposes the lie they were sold that sex itself was the prize. In reality, the prize is intimacy, and intimacy doesn't exist without honesty. The tragedy is that many relationships break down because of this exact gap. A man might believe he's showing love through physical intimacy while his partner feels unseen because the emotional part is missing. He thinks he's given everything, she feels she's receiving nothing, and the miscommunication grows until the relationship falls apart. If honesty was present, if the conversations about fears and needs had happened, that gap wouldn't exist. The physical and emotional would align, creating balance instead of emptiness. True fulfillment in sex comes when it's backed by trust, by openness, by the courage to expose what's really inside. It's not just about the body, it's about the willingness to share the parts of yourself that you don't show to the world. Emotional honesty turns sex into a safe space, a place where both people can be fully seen and fully accepted. Without that, no matter how good it looks on the outside, the inside will always feel empty. A new blueprint is needed because the old one has been breaking men down for generations. The rules that told men not to cry, not to talk, not to show weakness, not to admit fear, those rules built walls instead of bridges. They created families where love was present but rarely spoken, relationships where intimacy was physical but not emotional, communities where men walked around with heavy armor and silent wounds. That old script might have been designed to protect men, but in reality it kept them trapped. A new blueprint is about rewriting what strength, love, sex, and manhood mean so the cycles of silence and emptiness don't keep repeating. The old blueprint equated masculinity with toughness and dominance. It told men their value came from control over their emotions, over their partners, over their environment. That mindset worked in survival settings, but it fails in love. Love doesn't thrive under control, it thrives under trust. And trust only grows when people feel safe enough to be vulnerable. The new blueprint says vulnerability is not weakness, it's power. It says a man's ability to express his truth, to show his fears, to share his heart makes him stronger, not smaller. This shift doesn't mean abandoning strength, it means redefining it. Strength becomes the ability to listen without ego, to admit mistakes, to stay present when it's easier to shut down. It becomes the courage to say, I don't know how to do this, but I'm willing to learn. It becomes showing up with consistency, not just with money or physical protection, but with words, affection, and presence. The old blueprint measured manhood by what you provide. The new one measures it by how deeply you can connect. A new blueprint also redefines intimacy. For too long, men have been taught that sex is the main channel of closeness, but intimacy goes beyond the body. It's in the conversations at midnight, the honesty about fears, the willingness to share dreams. The new script says sex is not the proof of love, but the expression of it. And that expression is only real when it's backed by emotional honesty. That's what gives intimacy depth. That's what keeps it from becoming empty repetition. As blueprint also demands communication. Instead of silence, men are called to speak. Instead of burying pain, they ask to share it. Instead of using pride as a shield, they are invited to use openness as a bridge. Communication doesn't just heal romantic relationships. It heals families, it heals friendships, it heals Communities. A son who hears "I love you" from his father grows up knowing those words are allowed. A partner who hears "I was wrong" instead of silence learns that accountability is possible. Communication becomes the glue that holds love together. Another part of the new blueprint is breaking generational cycles. Men have to recognize the silence they inherited, the pride they were taught, and the patterns they've repeated. Breaking those cycles doesn't happen overnight, but it starts with small steps. Choosing to speak instead of shutting down, choosing to listen instead of defending, choosing to love openly instead of withholding. Each man who makes that choice changes the story for the ones coming after him. The blueprint isn't just for now, it's for the future. What makes this shift challenging is that it requires unlearning. Men have to strip away decades of conditioning and question everything they were told about what it means to be strong. That unlearning feels uncomfortable, even unnatural, but it's necessary. The old rules serve survival. The new rules serve living. Survival means keeping your head down and your mouth closed. Living means raising your head, speaking your truth, and creating connections that last. The new blueprint is about balance. Men don't have to stop being resilient, but they can't let resilience turn into silence. They don't have to stop being protectors, but they can't let protection turn into control. They don't have to stop being providers, but they can't let provision replace presence. Balance means embracing both sides. Strength and softness, action and communication, protection and vulnerability. That balance is what builds healthy love, lasting intimacy, and generational healing. A new way of being is necessary because the old way left too many men alone with their pain. Too many relationships collapsed under the weight of unspoken words. Too many children grew up craving tenderness they never heard. The blueprint going forward has to center on honesty, connection, and courage. It's not about men becoming less. It's about them becoming more. More open, more expressive, more whole. That's how the cycles break. That's how love grows deeper. That's how men finally live free. So here's where it all comes together. 40 years of silence, pride, ego, broken cycles, empty intimacy, and unspoken truths have shown us one thing. The old way ain't working. Men been carrying secrets so long they forgot they were even secrets. They wore masks so tight they started thinking the mask was their real face. But love, real love, don't survive in that kind of cage. It demands exposure, honesty, vulnerability. Without that, sex is empty, relationships collapse, families fracture, and pain keeps passing forward. The conclusion is simple but powerful. We need a new blueprint, a blueprint where men speak instead of staying silent, where pride steps aside so intimacy can step in, where ego doesn't distort love but humility strengthens it. A blueprint where fathers tell their sons, "I love you," where partners feel safe to admit their fears, where men stop chasing validation and start chasing connection. That's how cycles get broken. That's how healing happens. That's how love finally becomes whole. This isn't just about men. It's about the women who've been waiting for honesty, the children who deserve tenderness, the communities that thrive when love is alive. Change starts with exposure, and exposure starts with courage. The courage to be seen, the courage to be heard, the courage to be real. That's the secret men were never supposed to admit, but it's the one that sets them free.